Hello and welcome to another behind the scenes. Um, for Monday's episode of Music Monday, I want to illustrate the idea of layering sounds and explaining a bit about what white noise is and why it's important, and pink noise. What's the difference? Incidentally, if you are interested in how composing a whole cue goes together, as it turns out, if you look in the library, you will find Inspirational Cue Part 1 and Part 2, which is going from nothing to a finished cue. The final part of that will be part of Saturday Music School Live, which I've already recorded because I want to be live in the chat, so I can answer questions as we go along. They are quite long episodes, but it literally documents how I wrote the entire cue, and it has now been signed. So if that is of interest to you, go along and have a little look. Right, if you liked and subscribed, that's always really, really helpful. So we are going to look at layering sounds, and I need to work out a way to illustrate it. So I think one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to have to get up a test oscillator and explain what white noise and pink noise is. I'm obviously going to need an EQ to do that. So white noise being a constant level across the frequencies, but the point is, if you are listening carefully, you probably perceive that as quite high pitched, as in you think there are a lot of high frequencies more than the bass. Listen again. Even though you can see they are relatively the same, which is where pink noise illustrates the point quite well. That is a more balanced sound, and you can see the bass is boosted. And the highs are brought down, but overall it mixes together, so you can hear the basses, you can hear the highs. So that's going to be useful. Now, in terms of illustrating it with instruments, I think I'm going to stick to the Logic standard sounds, because the stock library, because they are relatively similarly recorded. So what we're trying to do is look at the levels. What's going to be most useful? Okay, so I'm going to have to obviously get some sound in. I want to see the effect of high and low frequency instruments on what happens to the total output level to try and illustrate this. Let's try putting that in. Okay. Then we want to add possibly violins, but higher. Now, if I mute that, we've got 5.3, and with the high violin, it's added another 2 decibels. But it's coming in at -12. So you might think that's at -5. -12. And we got another 5. Should take us to -7. But it doesn't. It takes us to -3. What if I add in another low instrument? Now, what's the lowest we got there? Actually, I'm now thinking it is probably better to go from the orchestral library, because that does have a tuba. Does have a bass. It does have violins, but I think, from memory, these are not as loud. So does that theory still work? -23. And adding in -22 should layer up, you might think, and get us close to 0. But actually it doesn't. Yeah, that didn't affect things very much. What else could we try adding in? Let's get some woodwinds. Go for a low bassoon. Okay, that's nudged it up ever so slightly. Our frequency now looks like this. And I suppose the point of this is you are trying to make it look like that. In the first place, to get a balanced sound, you are trying to get that noise shape. So it is biased towards the bass, because if let's get rid of the violins for a second, then put them back in, and you'll see the additional frequencies up here. As a starting point, you can lower the volume of the violins, but you still hear them. And that's the point, that higher pitch sounds are perceived by us as louder. Hence that pink noise curve, which makes things sound a lot more balanced. Now, the other point with layering instruments is making room. So probably going to ignore those violins for a second. Let's get away with bass. What does that look like? Okay, it's significantly pushed up our volume. Maybe just a low piano. In octaves, maybe. Don't think I needed to do that extra beat, did I? We're not writing a masterpiece here. Okay, so what you can see here is the bass is building up. That's intentionally what I'm trying to do. And we have a volume, oh, it's handy, -7. That's a peak value. And this is where you can hopefully see the benefit of making space for instruments by using the EQ. So if we look at, let's look at the basses first. So you can see where the frequencies are, and you might think to yourself, okay, those are the most important frequencies. Let's get rid of any rumble that might be there. You can probably and you should be able to hear that changing. So it does cut off some higher frequencies. Be careful. Okay, so listen to the basses. Let's listen to the what I did then? I put it on the master output accidentally. It will be the same, but that would really not have illustrated the fact particularly well. Okay. Another thing you can do is actually pull up an EQ curve and find the loudest parts. Of which there aren't particularly. That is very odd. Okay, there you go. That's the danger of doing things live, which is why we check these things out. Is make sure you've clicked on the right channel. Why is that not? Get to turn the analyzer on. Okay. We can probably go down to about 4K before rolling off the top end. Doesn't really affect the sound. Get this looping, because then I can show you the finding our active spot. There's quite a lot of rumble there, around 70, which is something you might think, oh, actually, I might therefore reduce it a bit. Quite a high frequency there, around 150. Now bear in mind, this scale is logarithmic. You don't need to do much of a change for it to have quite a difference on the sound. Then we can go down to the bass guitar, which I've just completely messed up. Now you might want that high twang. Which is in these upper frequencies. Okay, let's look at. Now this is already had EQ applied to it, but we can still choose to turn it on. Obviously, piano is pretty resonant across a lot of frequencies. Let's leave that as it is for the moment. And bassoon. And finally the violins. So you have that higher I'll just do that on. I must learn how to click in the right place. It's hard doing this under pressure. And then you would go back and think, where do I want the different instruments, or where is there an option to have an instrument stand out and have its own space? So if you want the bass to stand out in that sort of 150 region, what do you have to do? Well, funnily enough, I've already pulled that down in the basses, but I would go through and think, is there an opportunity reduce that one. Good frequency for, you know. And tuba. And bassoon. Because what you're doing is you're now carving out space so that bass has got its accent point and the other instruments are lower than it, out of its way, as it were. So it's -7. I thought that's where we were before. Which is weird. If I completely that was the bass guitar, that's what I was trying to get rid of. But we do lose volume, obviously, because you are removing back to 9, it's nearly -8, and then as you put it all in, increasing in volume up to -7 there. Obviously I'm going to have to explain this an awful lot quicker for Monday's episode, because I tried to keep them, well, the aim is to go about 15 minutes. Yeah, so if you are interested in how to write an inspirational cue, or it's quite good advice for any sort of cue, there is part 1 and part 2. Part 3 is coming on Saturday, which will be a premiere, so I can answer questions as it goes on live. And that will be the third part, which is taking the notes that I got back from the library after they'd heard it, which is basically where part 2 ends. That was me finishing the cue, sent it off to the library. They sent me notes, revisions, and that's what I'm going through on Saturday. So look forward to seeing you there. A good rest of your whatever day it is that you're watching this, in whatever year it is. Like and subscribe, always appreciated. Bye for now.